Hi, my name is Trent, and I'm going to be responding to the first negatives claims as well as reinforcing the first affirmatives claims. The first negative, he claimed that without the exclusionary rule, the Constitution would be labeled as just a jumble of random words. The exclusionary rule wasn't in, the one main problem with this is the exclusionary rule wasn't in the Constitution at the time of its founding. It was added later in multiple different court cases. And so due to that, the Constitution, before the exclusionary rule, was already an established document that made sense to anybody who could read it. And the addition of the exclusionary rule later causing it to be needed to unscramble the Constitution is a bit odd of a claim. He claims that a fine would prevent the exclusionary rule from having the necessary effect that it needed. And he says that billionaires could be able to exclude themselves from this rule by being able to pay their way through it. Typically, billionaires aren't searching for like illegal evidence and aren't searching themselves for court case evidence, and then typically police are doing that work themselves. And most police officers, if not all, are not billionaires. And a billionaire being able to pay a fine is not something uncommon in our society, but the fact that a billionaire would be the one using the exclusionary rule in their advantage to get a court case in their way would be a bit unnecessary, as the law enforcement themselves are typically going to do most of the legwork in investigating any kind of accusations or things against major companies like that. In an article written on findlaw.com called The Fourth Amendment and Exclusionary Rule, the exclusionary rule was actually created to deter police misconduct and limit the breaches of citizen rights, but it doesn't really effectively do that at the moment, as police don't have any real consequence to breaching the exclusionary rule. Most officers that actually breach the exclusionary rule don't actually know that they breached it. A lot of times officers aren't required to go to certain court cases for breaches or for arrests that they have made. Not every single type of arrest requires an officer to go to a court. And for those that do not require it, many of the officers never receive notification that they indeed breached the exclusionary rule, such as how my partner was saying with the good faith warrants. If they thought that a warrant was good and they went on that and it turns out that it wasn't good, they might not ever know about if that case would actually cause the evidence to be unused. The only true solution to be able to actually make the exclusionary rule effective in its ideal of preventing police from abusing their own power and seizing evidence that they do not rightfully have the right to look at without due process would be a punishment, such as a fine. As quoted by Monrad Paulson of scholarlycommons.com in the article, The Exclusionary Rule and Misconduct by the Police, he says that the exclusionary evidence rule says nothing about the content of the law governing the police. It only talks about it doesn't talk about the law outside of that illegal search. It only talks about the law regarding what evidence is obtained. The first negative also talked about how the police will respect individual rights, and talked about the 27% hit and run case. The officer planting the drugs on the hit and run suspect. That is not as common of a case. It's a really low frequency case, and officers that are involved in things like that are not only usually heavily fined or fired from their jobs, in many of the cases they are actually arrested and accused of many different crimes themselves. The exclusionary rule does not, at the moment, has no, like I said, no consequences for the officers in which it exists, so they're able to make breaches similar, not similar to the planting of illegal drugs on a suspect, but they're able to illegally search, illegally take a lot of evidence, such as even eavesdropping, without permission to be in the residence of any current place that they're in. If they hear things that they're not allowed to, say that they are not invited to a person's house, and they are currently breaching the house illegally, and they hear something the person might have said without them knowing, that evidence is also obtained, that also would be nullified in court and not allowed to be used. Police misconduct is a big issue. with enforcing things like the exclusionary rule. As set by the California Innocence Project, police misconduct statistics gathered by the Cato Institute's National Police Misconduct Reporting Project confirm that around 1% of all police officers commit misconduct in a given year, and that the consequences of such misconduct are very grim. Of the officers that do actually commit a misconduct violation, such as planting evidence illegally or unnecessary force, those officers are typically punished very harshly, up to the point of them losing their jobs completely. Thank you.